Hi guys, my name is Nonema Digela. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So today let's focus on one thing of importance also. It is important from the crime scene to docket, how contamination travels. Let's look into that. People think contamination happens once, a fingerprint touched, a photo missed, a glove forgotten. That's wrong. In real investigations, contamination travels. It moves from the scene to the statement, to the docket, to the courtroom. And by the time it reaches trial, it's wearing a suit and calling itself evidence. That's contamination. If you did not understand, let me take you through it. Step one, the scene sets the disease. Everything begins at the scene. If the scene is not neutral, if control is exercised off the books, then contamination doesn't start with evidence. It starts with decisions. Who is treated as a witness? Who is not questioned? What is considered relevant? What is dismissed as noise? From that moment, the investigation is already titled, not because someone shouted orders, but because silence guided choices. Step two, statements absorb the bias. Statements are not independent. They are shaped by the question asked, the order they are asked in, what the officer already knows, what the witness senses is expected. Once a narrative exists, statements don't record memory. They don't. They conform to it. Details drift, certainty increase, doubt disappears. This is how honest witnesses become unreliable without ever lying. Do you understand what is happening there? Step three, the docket freezes the story. The docket is where contamination hardens. Once something is in writing, it gains authority. It becomes reference material. It is cited instead of questioned. New investigators don't reinvestigate. They inherit. They assume the early work was done properly. They assume omissions were deliberate and justified. They assume silence means nothing happened. And so the first version of events becomes the spine of the case, even if that spine is crooked. That is why Warrant Officer Makubo, you can't find him in this because he investigated, even though there was investigations that were done. He did his own. Or perhaps because he was at the crime scene at the first night when the crime happened. Maybe that's why. Step four, derivative evidence multiplies the damage. Here is a legal danger zone. Once early contamination exists, everything built on top of it becomes derivative. Later arrests, pointing out confessions, expect opinions, timelines, all of that. Court calls this fruit of the poison 3, meaning even clean evidence can become unusable if it grows from corrupted fruits. Science cannot fix this. Expertise cannot rescue this. Time cannot erase this. Yeah, it is what it is. Step 5, courtroom confusion. By the time the case reaches court, contradictions look like incompetence. Missing links look like bad policing. Shifting versions look like memory failure. But the real cause is earlier. Much earlier, the court is not seeing random mistakes. It is seeing the ripple effects of initial contamination. And the longer the case runs, the harder it becomes to trace the damage back to its source. Why institutions resist admitting this? Admitting early contamination means admitting the case may be structurally unsafe. Years of work rest on compromised foundations. Accountability doesn't stop at junior officers. So institutions do what institutions always do. They defend the process. They blame individuals. They argue harmless mistakes, but contamination is never harmless. It doesn't wound loudly. It infects quietly. Now, why does this, it's heartbreaking, right? Why does this matter in the Meyiwa case? If the Senzo Meyiwa sin was controlled before full documentation, the contamination didn't end that night. It traveled into statements, into dockets, into arrest, into trial strategy. This explains why evidence feels unstable, timelines don't align, witnesses contradict each other, certainty keeps collapsing under scrutiny. They are symptoms. Let it click in. Let it sink in. Lock it in there. That's what happens. And also, justice doesn't usually fail in court. It fails quietly at the crime scene before the first page of the docket is ever written. And once contamination starts traveling, the system spends years mistaking momentum for truth until someone stops and asks, where did this really begin? Can someone do that for the Senzo Meyiwa case? And I believe someone did. It was Makubo and Joyce. And that is why today their 375 case was buried. That is why their 375 docket was buried. It was not disclosed. It was not merged with the 636. It's because they asked the question that no one wants to ask. They stopped and asked, yes, they had the document, the docket of case 636. They looked into it. They were like, something is missing. And fortunately for Makubo, he was there. And he was like, Joyce, look at this. This and this happened here that day. I'm sure he was giving intel of the 26th of October. And then he said, from that experience of that day, my findings are as follows. And then they followed up. Hence, they got to open case 375/1/2019. Years later, after Senzo had died, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yes, it was 4 years later when they did that. 4 years later, because it was opened in January 2019, case 375. And now it had a story to tell. And the story was not pretty. It was not a pretty story. It needed people to account, the police, the people inside the house, the first people that dealt with the Khumalos and the Friends of Senzo. That's what it was speaking to. It needed to be dealt with. So that is where we are right now. That is the problem that we have. And the question remains, where did this really begin? The contamination. How did it travel so fast, so long? Who started this nonsense? What are your thoughts when it comes to this? Let's talk comment section. I want to hear your views. Please do drop your thoughts there. You need to tell me, do you think that indeed the case is contaminated? Do you think the contamination started in 2014, the 26th of October? Do you think that whatever went wrong when it comes to this case, it happened because of what happened when the people came back from hospital and went to Kelly Khumalo's house? Do you think that is where everything went wrong? Do you think the phone calls that she made, especially the phone call to Chikotwa, in fact, not phone calls, let's forget the other phone calls. Let's focus on the Chikotwa phone call. Do you think it is the reason everything is the way it is now? I don't know. I'm just simply trying to understand what is happening there, what's going on. Your thoughts are very important. I'll see you on our next video. Bye-bye.